All right, let's dive into one of the most traumatic decades in American history. It's a story about how the biggest party the world had ever seen led to the worst economic hangover you can possibly imagine, and how a wild experiment called the New Deal pretty much changed everything.
This right here, this says it all, doesn't it? On the left, you've got the roaring promise of the 1920s. New cars, big money, this feeling that anything is possible. And on the right, just a few years later, you've got this crushing reality. So the big question we're tackling is, how on earth did the dream turn into this nightmare so incredibly fast?
So, to really get a handle on the crash, you've got to look at the party that came before it. The 1920s were just this period of explosive growth and massive cultural change. But, as we're about to see, it was a party built on a very, very shaky foundation. You know, if you had to pick one thing that just screamed boom, it was the automobile. Henry Ford's assembly line made cars something the average person could actually own, and the numbers are just, they're mind-boggling. We went from about 1 million cars on the road in 1916 to 23 million by 1929. This wasn't just some new gadget, it completely rewired American life. And it wasn't just cars either. Technology was just exploding everywhere, all thanks to electricity. In just one decade, the number of American homes with electricity basically doubled, from 35% all the way up to 68%. This brought in all kinds of new inventions, like toasters and vacuum cleaners. It must have felt like the future was just arriving on your doorstep. But here's the thing. Underneath all that glitter and growth, there was a really dangerous secret. These are the cracks in the foundation. A tiny 5% of the population had a third of all the money, while a staggering 80% of people had no savings at all. Just think about that for a second. If the economy so much as hiccuped, most of America was living without any kind of safety net. This wasn't just a wealth gap. Man, it was a time bomb just waiting to go off. And in October 1929, that bomb went off. Let's talk about the big one, the single event that brought the whole party to a screeching halt. The great stock market crash. So, how did everything fall apart so fast? Well, a huge part of the answer is something called margin trading. Think of it like this. You could buy $1,000 worth of stock, but you only needed $100 of your own cash. You're basically gambling with the bank's money, but here's the terrifying catch. The broker could call you at any moment and say, "Pay up. We want the full loan back, now." And this is exactly how that catch triggered the whole collapse. It was a perfect storm. First, everybody's borrowing like crazy to buy stocks that are just going up and up. Then, the market dips just a little bit. That's all it takes. The lenders panic. They start making those margin calls, demanding all their money back right now. So what does everybody have to do? They have to sell their stocks, all at the same time, to cover their loans. And poof, the entire system just implodes. The day it all truly broke was what we now call Black Thursday. And the numbers are just staggering. Stockholders lost $9 billion, an almost unimaginable amount of money back then in a single day. People dumped a record 16 million shares on the market, just desperately trying to get out. The party was officially and violently over. But you see, this wasn't just some problem for rich guys on Wall Street. Oh no. The crash on Wall Street quickly became a crisis on Main Street, and this is where a financial disaster turned into a widespread human tragedy. With no jobs and no savings, millions of families lost their homes. They ended up in these shanty towns, built from scrap metal and wood on the edges of cities. These places became these grim, awful symbols of the era, and they got a very pointed nickname, Hoovervilles. Yeah, the public blamed President Herbert Hoover for the whole crisis, and his name became this sarcastic prefix for misery. An empty pocket turned inside out, that was a Hoover flag. A newspaper you were using for warmth, a Hoover blanket. This wasn't just language, this was a nationwide vote of no confidence. And with the economy grinding to a complete halt, unemployment just went through the roof. I mean, just look at this trend. By 1933, a full 25% of the American workforce was jobless. That's 1 in every 4 workers, with no income and very, very little hope. So this crisis forces America to a crossroads, right? And you have these two completely different philosophies about what to do next. President Hoover, he's clinging to this idea of self-reliance, basically saying the government should stay out of it. His challenger, Franklin D. Roosevelt, argued for the exact opposite. He believed the government had a duty to step in and try something, anything, to fix the mess. Well, in 1932, Americans chose experimentation over self-reliance, and they did it in a landslide election. Franklin D. Roosevelt took office promising a new deal for the American people, and boy, did he get to work immediately. FDR's whole approach wasn't about having some single perfect plan. It was captured perfectly in his own words. Take a method and try it. If it fails, admit it frankly and try another. This was all about action, trying new things, and just being willing to do whatever it took to help people. And this whole flurry of new programs was guided by a really simple but powerful framework known as the 3 R's. First, immediate relief for people who are suffering. Second, long-term recovery to get the economy moving again. And third, and this one is so crucial, reform to make sure a crash like this could never, ever happen again. So priority number 1 was getting people jobs right away. Programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps or the CCC put millions of young men to work planting trees and maintaining national parks. Others, like FARA, created jobs building public works like roads and airports that we're still using today. See, the goal wasn't just to give a handout, it was to restore not just an income, but a sense of dignity, a paycheck. And if you want to see the sheer scale of the New Deal, just look at the Tennessee Valley Authority. This was one of the most ambitious projects of them all. It was this massive federal program that built dams across 7 states, bringing electricity, flood control, and thousands of jobs to one of the most impoverished regions in the entire country. Truly incredible. But the New Deal wasn't just about temporary jobs. Its most lasting impact? That came from the 3rd R, reform. These were the changes that were designed to fundamentally and permanently alter the relationship between the government, the economy, and the American people. To stop another 1929 from happening, the New Deal created powerful new watchdogs. The SEC was set up to police the stock market, and the FDIC was created to ensure bank deposits. If you have a bank account today, you still see those letters, FDIC, guaranteeing your money is safe. That is a direct legacy of this era. And then came maybe the most radical idea of them all, the creation of a national safety net. The Social Security Act of 1935 was revolutionary. For the first time ever, the federal government established a national pension for the elderly, unemployment insurance, and aid for the disabled. This was the birth of the modern American welfare state. So, what's the final verdict on the New Deal? Did it single-handedly end the Great Depression? Well, most historians say no. It was actually the massive mobilization for World War II that ultimately did that. But what the New Deal did accomplish was arguably more profound. It created a brand new blueprint for America, one where the government was now expected to protect its citizens from economic disaster. The New Deal's legacy is the blueprint for the economic system we live in today, from that FDIC stamp on your bank to the very concept of Social Security. But it leaves us with a critical question for our own time. Is the blueprint that was designed for the crisis of the 1930s still the right one for whatever crisis comes next?